Dan Menzel joins us on the line. Daniel, welcome.
Guys, it's great to chat again.
So, mate, how are things gathering and looming in Gather Round in Adelaide? What's the atmosphere around the town with the big event about to launch?
It's always exciting heading into the Gather Round weekend over here in Adelaide, obviously the third edition of it this year. I think that probably the most excitement this year is we introduced the Barossa, Lindock, for the first time, which the games have been held obviously at the Adelaide Oval, Norwood Oval and Mount Barker in the past. But this edition, the Barossa gets to showcase what's on offer out of the north of Adelaide, and we'll get to see a couple of games out there. So obviously North Melbourne taking on Gold Coast on Saturday, and then Richmond host Fremantle on Sunday around about midday. So that will be at Lindock, which should hold about 10,000 people. So it's probably going to be the real interest, I think, of the weekend.
Tell us about that ground, given that Fremantle, obviously one of our teams, will be playing there.
Yeah, it's a ground that will hold about 10,000. It's the deck and the surface is very similar to how they did it at Mount Barker. So it's not far off your standard dimensions of the MCG. It's one of those ones that they'll have the seating go up to be able to get a greater capacity in. But out north of Adelaide, you'd expect the weather to be even warmer out there, and the ball will certainly move quick. So it's going to be one of those games that if Freo can get on top early and play a lot of forward footy, which they've been doing in recent weeks, then they could put the Tigers under the pump.
How many people are expected to come to South Australia for Gather Round, Daniel?
It's a good question. It's one of those ones that we weigh up each year, and it's not necessarily the people, it's the economy and the amount of money that's been pumped into the economy that I know that Peter Malinauskas definitely bangs on about. So one of those ones that tickets have been sold out for a number of games for a number of weeks now. So I think that we'll see similar numbers to what we have in the past, but in terms of the economy, that's the one that I think is of real intrigue.
It's a fantastic event. And I think I said earlier on the show, I think I can't speak for all West Australians, but I think we've reached a point, or I've reached a point where I think this is the place for it and this is the right place for it. Given it's a central location, it's possible for all people from all states in Australia to get there, as opposed to, say, if it was held over here and a lot of people, most of the people would have to come all the way across the Nullarbor to get here. Is there a feeling that it's going to be there for the foreseeable future?
I think that's what the general gist of it over here is, and that's the expectation now as well with how good the first two editions have been. I agree that the geographical challenges with having it in WA would be the thing that would hold it back from heading over to Western Australia, and I just don't think you would get the same cut through if they did it up in Sydney, if they did it up in Brisbane, and that's why Adelaide at first was maybe the safe option to see how it would go and whether they would then look at spreading it elsewhere, but it's had such success and cut through that I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.
Yep, I agree with that. And you mentioned that all the tickets are sold out. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those ones that they obviously promote it very early, and obviously the Barossa, the Lindock games only hold 10,000. Norwood's around about that a little bit more, and then Adelaide Oval. So I do think it's quite good how they do roll it into one after another, and you can obviously get a couple of Adelaide Oval games in there, but Norwood's only 15 minutes from Adelaide Oval, so you can also duck down the road and head to another game, and Lindock's about an hour out of Adelaide. So for Fremantle supporters that will be coming in, it'll take you about an hour to get out to Barossa Park, but there's plenty of wineries out in that region, so it should be a really good day out there on the Sunday for Fremantle supporters. What's
your favourite Barossa red, Daniel? Can you recommend anything for the Freo fans going there?
Oh, there is. I was thinking about this yesterday. There's so many wineries out there that I don't know if I want to potentially put the rest of them out, but Seppeltfield's wineries out there. It's a beautiful winery. Penfolds, there's a number of them that you could head out to, and they're all in very close proximity as well. So you'll be able to get to a couple if you want to, potentially after the game or potentially on the Saturday. It's going to be around about 30 degrees here on Saturday, so a very warm day, and Sunday will be much the same.
I love Adelaide. I've spent a number of Septembers there when the Crows and Port Adelaide have been competing deep in final series. So given that it's called Gather Round, where do people gather in the city?
Look, Adelaide's pretty easy to get around, which I imagine you would understand, Duff. It's not as spread as Melbourne or Sydney, for example. So it's one of those ones that Adelaide Oval was obviously just on the northern side of the city. Norwood's on the eastern suburbs, so you could easily gather, I guess, in between those two areas. You've got Peel Street, which is a pretty popular venue after hours. So there's definitely going to be plenty happening in and around the city. But I do love the element of having the Barossa involved, which we saw with Mount Barker last year. Just that little bit out of the city, but there will be plenty happening throughout the weekend.
I'd imagine the pubs in North Adelaide, and there's some great pubs in North Adelaide, a couple I made myself all too familiar with when I was in my time there, and also Gooja Street get a bit of a workout, do they?
Yeah, they do. There's North Adelaide's starting to pick back up again, which is great to see, and you've got plenty of pubs in and around there. Obviously, there's a bit going on in and around the casino and around the Riverwalk there, so there is a bit happening, but it will be. I love that they've got a bit going on around the river as well, so families can come down and there'll be plenty of little things that kids can get involved with, and they do set it up like a really nice little festival in and around town. So it is one that, for anyone that wants to get along to the games, great, but there is plenty happening around the city of Adelaide as well.
Has the festivities of Gather Round helped douse the anger that the Crows are feeling right now after being stiffed yet again by the umps?
I think the Crows fans are feeling like they just had the umpires against them, which the reality is they don't. It's just an unfortunate circumstance. Again, it's happened, and when it's happened to them, it's been catastrophe. It's been really bad. I mean, they had that incident against Sydney where it was a goal umpire who actually lives in Adelaide, who made the decision, and that cost them finals.
Used to live in Adelaide?
Well, yeah, used to live in Adelaide. So it's one of those ones that they're errors against the Crows. There's errors against every team, but that certainly has punished them, unfortunately. And look, I don't think this is going to cost them finals. And the other part of this was there was still effectively a minute and a half to go in the game, and it would have been a tough shot. So I think that they'll move on reasonably quickly because they're going to have to. They take on Geelong this Thursday night, so it's a 5-day break for the Crows, who are playing some extremely impressive footy, but also attractive footy. They're the number one offensive team in the competition, and they've got back to what they looked like a couple of years ago when they really did push the best sides in the competition.
Riley Thilthorpe, it's an incredible time in the AFL at the moment in terms of the emergence of a number of really, really good young forwards, and we're talking a lot about Sam Darcy, but I thought Riley Thilthorpe's game on the weekend, and he got the 10 coaches' votes, was absolutely outstanding, and not just as a forward, but when he went on the ball, I thought he changed the shape and the momentum in the game there as well. Tell us a bit about his season so far.
Yeah, look, it's been really impressive from Riley. His season he's had, he obviously got injured in pre-season last year, and an injury to his knee. And what it meant was he was the one that everyone was talking about at the Crows 12 months ago that was about to burst onto the scene and just got held back. And you felt like that season almost got held back a little bit off the back of that. And when he came into the back end of last year, everyone saw how big he was, how much size he'd put on, and it almost was a blessing in disguise with how much work he was able to do in the gym and really get into himself in terms of that power and that work around the ground. And we're seeing it at the moment. He's leading the Coleman medal. They're extremely dynamic in that forward line with him and Fogarty and obviously Tex Walker. But his presence around the ground is something that I think is probably what's most impressive. And if he keeps going at this rate, there's no reason why he couldn't win the Coleman medal this year. It's going to be difficult with Fogarty, obviously, in the scoreboard and Tex Walker up there as well. But it's extremely impressive, and he is as hard as anyone to beat in a one-on-one contest at the moment.
His skill level is the thing that surprised me. You kind of think when you see a guy that big that he'll have a big guy's skill level, but he goes both sides of the body. He can fetch the ball on the ground. He's got great hunt for the ball on the ground. It was a very complete game in what I thought was the game of the season so far.
Yeah, it was. And I think we sort of forget a little bit that he was the number 2 draft pick in the 2020 draft. So he's always been touted skills-wise. He's always had good skills for a big bloke. He's never been filled out like he was. He was quite skinny when he got drafted. So you knew if he could grow into a man effectively, which he has now done, with those skills, with that body size, 201 centimetres, 100 kilograms, it's an impressive frame, and we're starting to see the best of Riley.
Certainly are. Port Adelaide have got a few challenges. What's going on there? They've played with a lack of intensity, I reckon, 3 out of 4 times this year. Do they need to make the call early on the transition from Ken to Josh, or do you think this is retrievable?
I'm not sure if it is retrievable, to be honest, Duff. It's one of those ones that, if you actually look at Port Adelaide's draw, and we spoke about this in pre-season, they needed to get off to a fast start. They needed to be 3-1 or 4-0, and obviously that's not the case. They're in a really tricky position where they're 1-3 now, with obviously 4 games haven't played for them. Their next 8 to 10 weeks is diabolical. It's as hard a draw as you'll see in the competition. Now, they face Hawthorn this week, then they run into Sydney at the SCG. It doesn't get a lot easier after that. They take on North Melbourne, who are patchy at the moment. We know that. But then it's a really tricky stretch in there in the middle part of the season where they face the Bulldogs, the Crows in a showdown. They run into Brisbane in there. So it looks pretty difficult for the Power from here. And look, if I'm Josh Carr, I'll be honest, I'm not sure I want to inherit the group right now. It's one of those ones that, is it a win-win situation for him? I certainly don't think so. Does Ken want to coach the season out? At this stage, that's what it's pointing to, and that's what he's suggesting. But I'm not sure that things would change much if they moved Ken on at the moment and Josh Carr took the reins anyway.
Their one wood is that midfield. Rosie, Butters and Horne-Francis going through there, and obviously Ollie Wines there as well. What's going on with Connor Rosie? Because he's looked flat in at least a couple of the 4 games they've played.
He has, and he's received attention in those couple of games, and that's what he's got to be better at. He's got to be better at negating that tag effectively. When Durham went to him, and obviously on the weekend Windhager at times, he just hasn't been the same player when he's able to run around freely. Now, we know that a lot of players obviously can struggle with the tag, but they need him. Obviously, Horne-Francis was back on the weekend with 3 goals and 28 disposals, and Zach Butters' first game back in obviously 6 weeks, so I wouldn't put too much blame on him. But the fact with it is that they just rely on too few, and that's part of their issue. And they were able to cover up last year, and a lot of their, I guess, mid-tier players played at really high levels, but we're not seeing that this season, and they're just not finding ways to be able to hit the scoreboard as well. I mean, they're small forwards on the weekend, all 4 of them combined for 0 goals. So it's one of those ones that if they're in and under superstars, they're young superstars that aren't getting it done, then I'm just not sure they've got the depth to be able to compete against the best side.
So a bit happened after they beat the Hawks in the final last year. Kenny Hinkley had a bit of fun with the Hawks, which I thought was completely overplayed by the AFL, given the Hawthorns had been sticking it up everybody for about 10 weeks before that. They didn't like it and they sooked a bit about it, but the Hawks have got more than their share of swagger, I think. If the Port Adelaide players can't get up for this game, given that it is a bit of a grudge match, do you think they can get up at all?
Yeah, I mean, Ken does coach on emotion. We know that, and we saw that last year in that moment that you talked about, and they were able to get up for that game. I completely agree. If you can't get up for Gather Round at home, almost the game of the round against a team that's undefeated with what went on last season, then there'll be plenty more question marks. And the question that you posed at the start, does Josh Carr take over, will certainly be one that will be talked about next week if they cannot get out and compete against a very good Hawthorn side at the moment. So it is going to be a tricky game. It's a late Sunday night affair, so it will be definitely talked about here Monday morning. It will be the number one talking point if Port Adelaide are able to get their season back on track, or are they slumping to 1-4 and the season just completely falling away.
Big start to Gather Round with the Crows and the Cats, and big finish with Port Adelaide and the Hawks. What's going to be your favourite watch for the weekend, Daniel?
Yeah, I actually am really intrigued with the Friday night game. The Collingwood and Sydney at Adelaide Oval. I just think that this is 2 teams that are starting to really hit their straps now. I think that the Pies, obviously, they started really poorly in opening round, but have been pretty impressive since. And the Swans, for mine, have actually had a really good start to the season with a number of players out. They could have beaten Hawthorn in opening round. They should have beaten Brisbane in round 1, and then they've been impressive to beat the Kangaroos and the Dockers away from home. So I think there's a lot of intrigue around this game to see which team actually is the real deal this season. And the other part of it I mentioned at the start is I am interested to see how the fans rock up out at Barossa Park at Lyndoch for the North Melbourne and Gold Coast game, and obviously the Richmond and Fremantle game on Sunday.
Thanks for joining us on the show, Daniel, and have a great time this weekend. It looks like Christmas in April for AFL footy in Gather Round in Adelaide this weekend. So hopefully everyone has fun and hopefully we get some great footy out of it.
No doubt. It will be a terrific weekend again, and always great to chat, Duff. Thank you.
Good on you. Daniel Menzel, he is part of the SEN family, of course, in South Australia, talking to us ahead of Gather Round this weekend. We'll be back with more after the break.